Greetings. This is Katerina Nesterenko in the studio with you. Today, here's what we're talking about. Explosions are rocking Belgorod, drones are striking power substations, and Russians are once again in blackout. Crimea is on fire. Powerful strikes on Russian airfields, the occupiers are in panic. The armed forces repelled assaults in the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk directions, and Russia is losing equipment and soldiers on a massive scale. A dying video of a Russian army assault trooper, the commander ordered him to be finished off. Germany trained Russians in modern military tactics before the invasion of Ukraine, and little green men have already been spotted on the border with Estonia. All this and more in just a few seconds. But right now, please like this video and subscribe to the channel Ukraine Today so you don't get lost on YouTube. Well then, let's get started. Things are once again unsettled in Russia's Belgorod. Local social media report a new attack on the power substation. I'm telling you, there's no light here again. What about the houses? After the strike, Russians lost electricity. It was loud in the Bryansk region as well, with explosions reported. Preliminarily, a substation in Vigonichi was attacked. There were also reports of explosions last night in Smolensk. According to preliminary information, smoke was seen rising in the area of the airfield and the aircraft factory. Explosions were heard near the airfield even during the period when the area was cordoned off by the authorities.
Subscribers report that between 0:54 and 0:57, 3 or 4 explosions went off near the airfields in Belbek and Kacha, and around 6 o'clock near the Saki airfield in Novofedorivka. Subscribers clarify that this did not seem like the work of Russian air defense.
It was also very loud last night in the cordoned-off area of Donetsk. Locals report explosions in the area of the former Ocean hypermarket. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense's Telegram channel, everything is still going according to plan for them. Ukraine has made a breakthrough in missile production. The most powerful long-range Flamingo and Neptune missiles are already actively targeting military and energy facilities in the enemy's rear. We will talk about the prospects for domestic missile and combat drone production, as well as the damage they inflict on the enemy's military infrastructure.
The consequences of the war unleashed by Russia are starting to return to its own territory in the form of Ukrainian drones and long-range missiles. The general staffs do not deny that after Belgorod, Muscovites themselves may soon experience what a blackout is like firsthand.
The meter isn't working. This is Putinova. On the right there, 10 and 12, 14, blackout. Left side of Putinova, blackout. Putinova. There.
Meanwhile, 2 more Russian regions, Tyumen and Sverdlovsk oblasts, have introduced restrictions on gasoline sales, no more than 30 liters per person. Previously, this new regulation affected the Khabarovsk Krai, Chelyabinsk Oblast, and the occupied Crimea. All these lines and empty gas stations are due to daily attacks on oil refineries. Commander-in-Chief Syrsky stated that in September, under the Deep Strike program, there were reports of 70 strikes on Russian territory.
We are destroying the aggressor country's production of fuels and lubricants, explosives, as well as other components of the Russian military-industrial complex. Among other things, oil production in Russia has decreased by 21%.
The intensification and expansion of Ukraine's so-called long-range sanctions against Russian territory became one of the main topics at the president's meeting with the security bloc.
Ukrainian long-range weaponry is becoming significantly more advanced. We are constantly working on this and have already provided a variety of opportunities for production, the necessary funding, and all the required support. We have clear plans regarding this for the coming months. Everything must be implemented. Ukrainian leadership is already visible, but there should be more. It is absolutely fair that Ukraine delivers retaliatory strikes, precise strikes unlike Russia. We know what we want to achieve. Of course, peace.
Currently, the carriers of sanctions deep into Russian territory are the Flamingo and Neptune missiles, and the first launches by Firepoint were announced at the end of summer. At that time, footage of the Flamingo launch appeared online. Analysts suggested, however, that they flew toward the territory of occupied Crimea. The publication Welt reported that it was these missiles that destroyed the FSB base on the peninsula. 3 missiles left craters 15 meters in diameter each. At the same time, German journalists reported that 50 missiles are rolling off the assembly line every month, with plans to increase that to 200 per month. And now, the Russians have supposedly displayed the wreckage of a downed Flamingo missile. According to their information, it was hit on Russian territory by a Buk system at an altitude of 100 meters and a speed of 600 kilometers per hour. Judging by the serial number, the occupiers assume this is the 106th munition produced in September. There is no reliable confirmation that the Flamingo destroyed the FSB base. Military analysts believe that behind these successful strikes, and not just this one, could be the Neptune itself. Today, 3 of its modifications have already been tested and put into serial production in the Ukrainian defense industry. A 4th one is being prepared.
Testing is underway now. This is the long-range Neptune, which can reach 1,000 kilometers. It is currently undergoing testing. It has already achieved, let's say, positive results. And further, the process of putting it into serial production will proceed in parallel. I believe this series of Neptunes makes the country more capable of realizing our combat potential. Because not every country in the world has cruise missiles, and even fewer have cruise missiles that, in the future, will be both sea and land-based. And let's say with different ranges. For
obvious reasons, Ukrainian weapons manufacturers do not share much information about strikes against the aggressor. But President Zelensky has admitted to the press that the defense forces even combine them, and analysts recognize this as a successful practice that Ukrainians can adopt from their enemy. This
missile is likely to be more mass-produced, but at the expense of being different and cheaper compared to the high-tech Neptune missile. And here there are a whole range of combinations. For example, the Neptune missile is less detectable and more accurate. It can be used to clear a corridor or even the other way around. For example, a number of Flamingo missiles, which will be very noticeable but very cheap. They will be used as missiles that divert enemy air defense forces. At the same time, while the enemy is distracted, the less detectable but accurate Neptune missile will pass through and deliver a targeted strike.
The Ukrainian defense industry is now nothing like it was at the start of the full-scale Russian aggression. The country's military and political leadership has finally realized that only local arms manufacturers can guarantee stable weapons supplies to the front. Of course, provided there is adequate funding. But with each passing day, as the skies are increasingly terrorized by unknown drones, Europeans and Scandinavians are showing more interest not only in Ukraine's experience, but also in cooperating with Ukraine in the production of weapons suited to the realities of modern warfare.
Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful to you for your support, and we're glad to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well which country you're watching from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments, and in the meantime, we continue. Now, on to the most interesting part. Volodymyr Zelensky held talks with Donald Trump, discussing strengthening Ukraine's air defense and Russia's energy strikes.
Today, I received the necessary signals that America is considering ways to strengthen our cooperation. Thank you.
According to Axios, during the conversation between the two leaders, the possible transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine was also discussed. Let me remind you, Trump previously said that he had practically made a decision on the deliveries, but wants to understand exactly how Ukraine will use them. Why is this important? These missiles would allow strikes deep inside Russian territory, including Moscow. And in the opinion of the Ukrainian side, they will help force Putin to come to the negotiating table. Meanwhile, the Financial Times, citing its own sources, reports that since the summer, the US has already been helping Ukraine carry out strikes deep inside the Russian Federation on key energy facilities. Kyiv selects the target, and Washington provides intelligence on the weak points of Russian infrastructure. And now, to the front lines, Ukrainian defenders have repelled an enemy assault in the Zaporizhzhia direction. On October 9th, the Russians threw 35 units of heavy armored vehicles against Ukraine's defense forces, trying to capture the village of Shakov in the Osheryetinske direction. But Ukrainian troops repelled the attack. 107 killed, 51 wounded, 3 tanks destroyed, 16 armored fighting vehicles, 41 motorcycles, and 2 cars eliminated. And units of the 24th Separate Assault Battalion Aidar, together with the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment, raised the Ukrainian flag over the liberated village of Mali-Shkerbaki. In the Donetsk direction, operators of the 427th Separate Unmanned Systems Regiment Rarok destroyed 5 Russian tanks and a Grad system. They stopped the enemy's assault actions and deprived the infantry cover group. In the Apokrovsky direction of Donetsk region, the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment destroyed 13 Russian assault troops on motorcycles during an enemy breakthrough attempt. The situation on the front line remains tense. The enemy does not stop trying to attack and storm, but Ukrainian forces are maintaining maximum defense. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that greatly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you can't do it financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they are watching us. And while Ukraine continues to fight for its freedom and independence on the front lines, there is complete lawlessness within the Russian army. Russian blogger Ekaterina Limarenko published on her Telegram channel the final message of a stormtrooper from the 137th Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces with the call sign Kran, who signed the contract directly from prison.
I know about many violations. They eliminated people. I know about a case. I know where those are buried. And there was a specific order regarding me so that I would be eliminated, so that I wouldn't leave the combat position. And
the stormtrooper also spoke about how he was brutally beaten.
They beat me up precisely when I first left for Sochi. They caught me and beat me very brutally with a heavy bucket and a sturdy stick. Then they shoved me forcefully into a deep pit, and from that dark and confined pit, I was immediately sent on a dangerous combat mission, still in handcuffs. My entire arm became severely infected, though I miraculously managed to heal it over time, but still, my hands, my fingers, were all badly beaten up and quite swollen, and my legs were tightly tied up, making movement extremely difficult.
The blogger received his last voice message, asking her to publish this video because he was finished. Very close by, there were the sounds of gunshots and nothing else. It's brutal, but this is exactly what the Russian army looks like from the inside. Russia has experienced the sharpest weekly inflation spike since the beginning of winter due to rising gasoline prices. Inflation is accelerating again for the week from September 30th to October 6th. The consumer price index rose by 0.23% after a 0.13% increase the previous week. What do these numbers mean for so-called ordinary Russians? We cover this in our report.
Resources are on the verge of exhaustion, and claims about the stability of the Russian economy do not stand up to the facts. War, sanctions, inflation, and uncontrolled spending are destroying it from within.
But this is not our choice. We do not want things to develop this way.
Whether you want it or not, it has already happened. Over the past 3 years, Putin has repeatedly boasted about the resilience of the Russian economy. However, these claims turned out to be illusory. Annual inflation in Russia has exceeded 8% and gasoline prices have risen by more than 10%. In simple terms, this is the collapse of the Russian economy.
I have already mentioned that the budget, let's put it this way, is in deficit. And if before they used to say that there would be a problem now, but not later, now they are saying, no, the problem will last for another 4 years at least. And another problem, which is now also being reported by the Russian press, specifically the business press, which is usually not in opposition, but is now temporarily positioning itself as such, is that due to this deficit, the government is being forced to borrow money. Because of this significant financial situation, the burden of debt servicing in the upcoming period, specifically in the year 2026, will unfortunately exceed the total spending allocated for both essential education and critical healthcare services.
In the week from September 30th to October 6th, the consumer price index rose by 0.23%. The last time prices increased this quickly was some time ago, according to Rosstat.
The main point is not that there is a spike in one particular week, while all the other weeks show the opposite effect, so we shouldn't focus on just this week. The important thing is that since the beginning of autumn, inflation has been present every week. Sometimes it's 0.08, sometimes 0.13, sometimes 0.23, but it's constantly rising. In other words, the period when prices were falling was in the summer, and that period is over. From now on, most likely, there will only be growth until the end of the year.
The main factor is the rise in fuel prices. Gasoline went up by 0.9% in a week and by 10.2% since the beginning of the year. Diesel fuel by 0.4%. At first glance, these numbers may seem insignificant, but in macroeconomics, these are huge jumps.
Undoubtedly, fuel is now the main driver of inflation. The rise in fuel prices is outpacing everything else. Growth.
The rise in prices and the fall of the ruble have been the result of Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries, causing Russia to lose fuel production and forcing it to raise domestic prices.
These strikes by Ukrainian drones have led to Russia now being forced to change its policy on the domestic fuel market. Not only has Russia already banned the export of certain products since the beginning of the year, last year in 2024, this brought Russia 47 billion US dollars. But now Russia is being forced to import fuel. For example, imports from Belarus in September increased fourfold compared to, if I'm not mistaken, August due to fuel supplies from Belarus. And there is already talk of importing fuel from China.
But even this doesn't help. There are kilometer-long lines for gasoline at gas stations.
Oh my gosh. Everyone is driving around. Looks like gasoline has just appeared here.
Since the beginning of August, drones have hit more than 20 major oil refineries in Russia, leading to the deepest fuel crisis in the country's history. Accordingly, the production capacity for gasoline and diesel has decreased, and with it, Russia's budget revenues have also fallen.
The Russian economy, its backbone is the oil and gas sector, meaning it's directly about oil and oil products. As I mentioned, last year, in 2024, Russia exported oil products worth $47 billion. And if we go back to the time before the start of the full-scale war, it was 75 billion US dollars. So this is what Russia used to earn, and now Russia is not just failing to make money from this, Russia is actually losing money on it. It is forced to pay Belarus, it is forced to pay China, and something tells me that neither China nor Belarus will supply these products to Russia at favorable prices. They will be making a profit themselves.
Fuel crises have happened in Russia before, but this year the price increase has been extremely rapid.
This is indeed a truly huge blow that will significantly affect the entire economy, primarily because in this particular region, the vast majority of essential goods are still predominantly delivered by road transport. And when the price of gasoline rises, and there's also diesel, for example, for diesel locomotives, accordingly, the increase in diesel prices affects the costs of rail transportation. All of this gets passed on to the prices on store shelves, and those shelf prices are what drive inflation.
Economists note that Russia is facing a typical wartime crisis: rising military expenditures, a budget deficit, and increasing prices for fuel and food.
The figures we have, which indicate that the planned inflation target will not be met and that things will be worse, are all official data. And I think that the real data are a bit worse, or maybe even much worse, than the official Russian figures. So these are the realities in which the Russian economy finds itself, and I repeat, this is what influences the analysis of international institutions and journalists such as The Economist and Bloomberg, who say, oh, Russia is actually losing this war economically. There is a comparison of Russia to a man with a gun who has cancer. He can kill people because he has a gun in his hands, but inside he is being eaten away by problems. In the same way, Russia is being eaten away from within by its economy, and the question is when, in the end, it will finally be consumed.
In simple terms, the Kremlin dictator by starting
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
After the news about inflation in Russia, there's yet another blow to Russians' wallets, this time a spiritual one. In Kopeysk-Chelyabinsk region, parishioners of the local church were shocked by a new price list for church services. The widow of a so-called SVO hero laments that now a memorial service for her late husband will cost her 5,000 rubles.
Every year, I order a memorial service for my late husband. I saw the price list and was stunned. 2 years ago, I paid 100 rubles for one name for a year, but now it's 5,000 for one name for a year. 5,000 for one name for a year. I was absolutely shocked.
But that's not all the news from the Russian Orthodox world. For example, Moscow Archpriest Sergei Kulpinov advised elderly people to sell their homes, give the money to their children to help young families, and then pass away peacefully themselves. After all, they've already lived their lives.
I always say, if you love your daughter so much, then sell your property so she doesn't kill your grandson. Sell your property and help your daughter. And then die yourself. You've already lived your life. Well, you already know what love is. You know what life is. Give your grandchildren a chance to live.
Yes, as you can see, this is no joke. In short, inflation has now deeply affected the so-called Russian spiritual world as well. Russians, hang in there, don't lose heart. After all, as we can see, your country is successfully rising from its knees. Putin's friend, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, just can't calm down. He has started collecting signatures against Brussels' military plan to support Ukraine.
A few weeks ago, Brussels' military plan was presented in Copenhagen. Europe pays, Ukrainians fight, and in the end, Russia will be exhausted. We were not told how much this would cost or how long it would last. Instead of a strategy, Brussels ended up with nothing but empty dreams. In Denmark, I made it clear, we do not support this.
According to the Prime Minister, a campaign has already been launched against Hungary, involving fake news, accusations of espionage, and legal manipulations. Orbán warns of a heated autumn and promises to visit every city and village to collect the signature of every peace-loving Hungarian. Let me remind you, against this backdrop, parliamentary elections are approaching in Hungary, and Orbán accuses Ukrainian intelligence of infiltrating through a local pro-Ukrainian party. The Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs responds, the absurdity is growing, and the accusations have become constant. Before Russia's attack on Ukraine in 2014, Germany, by decision of former Chancellor Angela Merkel, was training the Russian army in modern combat tactics. The German publication Spiegel reports that, with the support of Merkel's government, there were plans to create an entire network of training centers in Russia modeled after the German Altmark training ground, where modern combat simulations were practiced.
The defense conglomerate Rheinmetall, with the support of Merkel's government, was developing simulators, software, and equipment for the Russian military. A contract worth about €1 billion was expected.
Journalists also recall the NATO summit in Bucharest in 2008. At that time, Ukraine and Georgia were denied membership in the alliance, and Russia was effectively given the green light.
Let us recall that during the NATO summit in April 2008, Ukraine and Georgia were denied entry into the membership action plan for the alliance. According to journalists, Merkel's position played a significant role in this. A few months later, Moscow launched military actions against Georgia and later prepared for the invasion of Ukraine.
As for cooperation between Russia and Germany in the defense sector before the invasion, the German government justified its actions by a desire to maintain stability. However, as we can see, the result turned out to be quite different. And now a question for you, viewers. Did Merkel realize that the strategy she chose for interacting with Russia was, to put it mildly, ineffective? Remember how, in 2014, Crimea was overrun by little green men? Now imagine that this is happening again on the border with Estonia. On Friday evening, Estonian police and border guards temporarily closed the Zaporizhzhia section of the road, which passes through Russian territory. There, they noticed more armed little green men than usual. According to ERR, Estonian border guards asked the Russian side what was happening. The response was, these are completely routine actions. But for Estonia, this became a warning sign.
We saw various movements of armed groups at the border and in its immediate vicinity. Judging by their uniforms, they were definitely not border guards. Starting from the third hour, our patrols recorded that the groups were moving along the road through the Zaporizhzhia. And while at first they moved along the edge of the road, later they lined up across the road. For us, this was a clear warning sign.
The road will remain closed at least until Tuesday. The situation is serious. It's the same tactic as in Crimea. And a question for you, viewers. Do you think Putin is just trying to intimidate, or is this a new escalation? Let's discuss it in the comments. Russia is preparing to attack NATO right after the war in Ukraine ends. New forecasts from analysts at the Institute for the Study of War. In their opinion, Putin will retain significant combat potential for several months after the fighting in Ukraine ends. And according to the analysts, the Russian dictator will be able to quickly redeploy this force to the eastern flank of the alliance.
Constant sabotage and reconnaissance activities by Russia using drones against military bases and critical infrastructure in Europe indicate that Russia has already entered the zero phase, the phase of creating informational and psychological conditions for its campaign to prepare for a possible future war between NATO and Russia. Russia's long-range strike capabilities and expanded drone production capacities pose a direct threat to NATO. Russia's force-building efforts and reports about the creation of a strategic reserve of human resources, which it could use in Ukraine or in a future land war against NATO, demonstrate that Russia is capable of sustaining and replenishing its manpower despite the consistently high losses it has suffered in the war in Ukraine.
The main takeaway is this: the threat to NATO could emerge much sooner than expected. Ukraine has set a global precedent in the production and use of maritime drones. More details to follow.
The days of the Russian Black Sea Fleet are numbered. There is less and less time left until the occupiers are completely defeated. This week, Ukraine marks the 3rd anniversary of the first strike on the Crimean Bridge. On October 8, 2022, a powerful explosion rocked the crossing, seriously damaging both the road surface and the railway line. That was when Ukraine introduced an entirely new and unique branch of the military and its own advanced weapon, the maritime drone.
As a result of the incident, automobile traffic on the Crimean Bridge was halted.
That was when the whole world learned what Ukrainian maritime drones are capable of.
Ukraine demonstrated that its maritime drones, here they are, there's probably a picture of what they look like. These maritime drones are an effective weapon.
Over the past 3 years, Ukrainian maritime UAVs have become the masters of the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Putin's much vaunted Black Sea Fleet is forced to hide from our drones in remote ports.
This is, in a way, a kind of army of the future. This is the element that will help save human lives, that will allow us to operate more efficiently.
The effectiveness of modern Ukrainian maritime weaponry is hard to dispute. Time and again, it manages to break through the enemy's defense system and make its way into Russian ports and bays.
Drones, both in the air and on the ground, are highly visible, and they are targeted by, among other things, automatic cannons. So basically they are firing as if aiming, but really just by eye, and yet they can't hit it. And this is despite, once again, the fact that the lighting is excellent, it's perfectly visible, it's moving relatively close by, they still can't hit it. It's a total disaster.
And with each new attack on Russian warships, Ukrainian drones are becoming more and more advanced technologically.
Naturally, now they're going to strike at this entire chain simply because the Ukrainians have really committed to this. They're succeeding. They see that Russia's air defense system is literally failing everywhere. So why not give it a try?
Now, Putin no longer has a single remote base in the Black Sea where the bunker dweller could hide his fleet from Ukrainian drones. It has just been officially reported that the Ukrainian state-owned defense conglomerate, Ukroboronprom, has successfully signed a significant cooperation agreement with its American partners. This pivotal agreement generously grants Ukraine the invaluable opportunity to acquire and utilize an entirely new and advanced type of drone Ekranoplan, which boasts an impressive operational range of almost 5,000 kilometers and a substantial payload capacity of 1 full ton.
We have agreed to cooperate within the float and fly concept, and we also plan to jointly develop solutions to increase the speed and stability of our products. We are interested in developing production on the territory of Ukraine, as well as organizing training for our weapons specialists.
This news has caused another wave of panic in the Kremlin. Now every military vessel, and all without exception, Russian army bases in the Black Sea are under the crosshairs of the Ukrainian armed forces.
We can clearly see that now both the impressive quantity and the superior quality of these advanced drones allow Ukrainian forces to strategically vary their operational use and effectively create a certain diverse mix of different types of unmanned aerial vehicles in order to successfully achieve their critical objectives.
And Ukrainian soldiers, more than anyone else, know how to achieve their goals by any means possible. It's no coincidence that they are setting global trends in naval operations. Ukraine's naval drones have prompted other countries to adopt similar technologies. Today, our unmanned boats are the main participants in modern exercises conducted by Portugal. In front of representatives of NATO naval forces, with the involvement of dozens of defense and technology companies and their experimental weapons, a 3-week battle is being held for control over a notional 10,000 square miles of ocean. As a result of the prolonged sea battle, Ukrainian drones demonstrated their highest level of effectiveness. Now, according to military experts, the experience gained by the armed forces of Ukraine will be scaled up in the Black Sea.
Ukraine has acquired, and this is now confirmed by all recent and unfolding events, a truly effective weapon to decisively counter Russia's significant naval monopoly, and in actual fact has completely undermined that long-standing monopoly.
If a year ago, Ukrainian drones had effectively driven the Russian fleet out of Sevastopol, now it will find no peace even in Novorossiysk. The Kremlin is clearly unable to keep up with Ukraine's new maritime technologies. While Russian sailors are training to shoot at surface targets, Magura drones, for example, are being equipped with machine guns, anti-aircraft and anti-ship missiles. Some of them are even already serving as miniature aircraft carriers, acting as platforms for launching drones.
Such drones can be of various types and moreover can be effectively utilized in a swarm method, which is a tactical approach specifically designed to reliably inflict significant damage upon the enemy fleet and its valuable assets.
By invading Ukraine in 2014, Putin triggered a whole revolution in naval warfare. Over the past 3 years, Ukraine has completely rewritten the course of such battles, and its contribution to the development of naval forces is already being compared by Western experts to technological breakthroughs of their time, such as the construction of submarines or even the advent of steam power replacing ship sails.
That's all for now. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel Ukraine Today so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. See you next time.